UU minister and theologian Dr. Tendeka wrote, "This common world I love anew as the lifeblood of generations who refuse to surrender their humanity in an inhumane world. This courses through my veins. My despair is transformed to hope, and I begin anew the legacy and the light of caring." May it be so each week when we enter through these doors or sign on Zoom. Blessed be. Do you recall there was an old television series called Malcolm in the Middle? Any of you remember that? It was a comedy depicting a Midwest family. As a Midwesterner, I watched it because I wanted to see how they were portraying our Midwest people. So in this series, it was peppered with real-life experiences. For example, there were 3 boys. There's a slide. There was a mother and a father who worked, and the 2 adults were trying to arrange what they considered a good education for the 2 youngest. So Malcolm was over on the left. So the parents came across a Protestant church that ran a day school. The couple thought maybe if they went to church, they could sign their boys up for free tuition. One Sunday, the family attended church. The following week, they registered the boys. The next week, the family was interviewed by the school, and the 2 boys were accepted. After a few days of attending the school, however, the boys became unregistered. Here's what happened. In one of the scenes, the teacher of the youngest child, Dewey, asked the boy to do a chore. She said something on the order of, "It would please God if you would sweep the classroom this morning." Dewey, who was maybe 6 years old, responded with much animation and a lengthy monologue. It went something like this. "God doesn't care what I do. He's nothing but this giant in the sky, and all of us are just ants. At any moment, God will smite thee, and we will be squashed dead on the ground, gasping for breath and bleeding everywhere." The boy pounded on the hand and fist like this. He stomped his feet and flailed his arms. The teacher looked shocked and mortified. In the next scene, Malcolm, the middle-aged child, was in a conversation with his teacher. With a dreamy, faraway look and an angelic expression, the boy was telling his teacher that he had traveled the world in a basket that was held under a large hot air balloon. He said he traveled all over the world and he met God above the clouds. As he came closer, God pulled out a giant needle, burst the balloon, and Malcolm came plunging to the earth. The teacher looked at this boy in disbelief. I've never forgotten that episode. How could you, right? But it exemplifies a fact. Through the years and across the globe, humanity has conjured all kinds of perceptions of God or a mysterious unknown. Everything from God, the loving Father, the great judge, the one who smites thee. We are aware of gods. We are aware of goddesses as the God of good deeds delivered by human hands, creator of all, as one who comforts and a beloved co-creator. And I'm sure there's a description I'm missing. Among many people, God is perceived simply as love in its purest form. But maybe God is a great designer of life events. Maybe God is creativity and or a presence existing in all natural things. For some, God is understood as a trinity, a spirit, a son, and a father. Maybe for some, God is a unity, a sacred oneness existing in everything. Anita Barrows, who translated a book on Rilke's Book of Hours, stated that she was brought up in a highly patriarchal Jewish family and that she was steeped in an image of God as jealous, hot-tempered, a remote eye in the sky, watching and waiting for us to falter and to fail him, that kind of a deity. Her perception was that God was a punitive presence. In Vedic scripture, Sanskrit, God is simply whole energy that exists in the universe. It's present, this energy, in each of us before we are born. And shortly before birth, whole energy is split into two forms. After a person is born, one has only half of that energy. Called Shakti, or earth energy, it is the powerful force that remains coiled at the base of one's spine. The goal in one's life is to carry that force through the energy centers that exist along the spinal cord to reunite it with Shiva, the divine or energy of the highest form. Only through asanas or postures, I'm talking about yoga, through the way the body bends and moves, through breathing exercises, through meditation, and a series of basic practices that include inner restraint. And this is powerful. When we think of civilized, we think of people who are restrained in responses that might be immediate in your head, yet we hold ourselves back because we are growing closer to Shiva. So we're working on inner restraint in both the public and private realms that one can ever attempt, only then to reunite the forces that used to be whole but aren't whole anymore. In some teachings, God is thought to be a great light that becomes hidden by obstacles. And then there is this. Some have pondered the existence of God and have dismissed the idea totally. Perhaps some are in this room or on Zoom. I've been fascinated for years now with how the idea of God is cherished in some people's lives and how the whole concept is dropped in others. I'm perpetually intrigued with a concept that will likely never be fully understood. I suspect I'm not alone. Here is a poem by Rilke. He wrote, "I circle around God, that primordial tower. I've been circling this tower for thousands of years, and I still don't know. Am I a falcon? A storm? A great song?" Think about that. Isn't that a lovely piece? It's a beautiful reflection on a poet's interest, partly about the idea of God, but mostly his approach toward the idea or the concept of God. Are you, in this room or on Zoom, are you a falcon? The term falcon is Latin for wanderer or traveler or foreigner or seeker. Are you a storm? Does the topic of God throw you into 1,000 angry winds? Are you a song? Are you filled with lightness when pondering the idea of a mysterious other? So the wonderful thing about Unitarian Universalist faith, our faith, is that we covenant to support each other on our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. What is regarded as the fourth principle celebrates the seeking, each person's personal search not for the truth, which, as you heard the children's story, begins to create fights among people, not the truth, but as truth is perceived in a personal way. We are indeed free to pursue our personal opinions, even as we move in a community collectively forward, bound and determined to make a difference in the world, a positive difference. Rilke, the poet I want to discuss this morning, was not a Unitarian Universalist. However, if he were living today, he might likely favor us. Maybe, maybe not. Susan Haskins, author of Mary Magdalene, Myth and Metaphor, wrote it was Rilke's explicit belief that Christ was not divine, that he was entirely human and deified only on Calvary, as expressed in an unpublished poem that Rilke wrote in 1893, and referred to in other poems of the same period, which allowed him to portray Christ's love for Mary Magdalene, though remarkable, as entirely human. The poem Haskins references was written 6 years before Rilke wrote Book of Hours, the collection of writings I want to share with you this morning for a moment or two, not for hours. Renee, who later asked to be known as Rainer, was born in Prague in December of 1875. He was 23 when the book of poems, the Book of Hours, came to him. He said they were inner dictations or words that struck him in the mornings and evenings that came to him with force and persistence. They were written down in 3 brief but intense periods between 1899 and 1903. Rilke called them Gebete, which is German for prayers. They were intimate, private, not created for the public, but thank you very much that they were published. Originally composed in German, the collection is accessible to us today in an English translation by Anita Barrows and Rilke scholar Joanna Macy. Yes, that Joanna Macy, a mother of environmentalism who was a disciple of Harvard's David Korten, who wrote the 2006 book titled The Great Turning, From Empire to Earth Community. The first chapter or book within the Book of Hours is called The Book of Monastic Life. Here's the first poem from that book. The hour is striking so close above me, so clear and sharp, that all my senses ring with it. I feel it now. There is a power in me to grasp and give shape to my world. I know that nothing has ever been real without my beholding it. All becoming has needed me. My looking ripens things, and they come toward me to meet me and to be met. So in this poem, Rilke recognizes that if God is present, this ground of being, as theologian Paul Tillich said many years later, that this ground of being that is always trying to be in connection, in conversation with humanity, that exists within and only by Rilke's beholding or acknowledging it. In poem 36 of the first book, Rilke writes that God is understood as the one who might miss Rilke, might miss humans if we weren't around. One begins to understand that Rilke is intensely interested in the concept of relationship. For example, here's a very small excerpt. This caused me to ponder for at least a month. What will you do, God, when I die? Shall we just ponder that? No, I need to go on. The first book, this is why I was in seminary, right? What I loved about seminary was we were talking about stuff that will never have answers, that could not, it wasn't accounting, it wasn't finite, and I still love this. The first book was informed by Rilke's early travels when he was 21 years old or so, and a student in Munich in 1897. This was when he first observed Italian paintings, specifically Fra Angelico, and another one, and then Botticelli, and another one. So those two artists represented a view of the holy that was rooted in the body. And notice there was always more than one person in those paintings, also in human relationship. After viewing the paintings and after falling in love with a Russian Roman named Lou, whom Nietzsche himself was an earlier devotee, Rilke wrote this piece. We must not portray you in king's robes, you drifting mist that brought forth the coming morning. Once again, from the old paint boxes, we take the same gold for scepter and crown that has disguised you through the ages. Piously, we produce our images of you till they stand around you like 1,000 walls. And when our hearts would simply open, our fervent hands hide you. By the summer of 1900, Rilke was no longer in relationship with Lou, who had earlier encouraged him to mosey along, experience life. Later in Rilke's writing, he reflected on poverty. And if there's been one criticism that I've come across reading Rilke, it is that he he sentimentalized poverty. Upon reading them, it appears he was trying to understand actually how suffering exists. This is another thing that makes us connected, creates a connection to other people that we know, we don't know now, that we didn't know then, that we won't know in the future. It is this idea of how does suffering exist? He was trying to understand how suffering exists, how the vast knowing or how God allows it, and also how people can make one person suffer, other people suffer, or let other people suffer so severely. Do you see that we, all of humanity, tend to, throughout the ages and even today, share the same questions? Here's an excerpt of another one of his poems. You are the poor one, the destitute. You are the stone that has no resting place. You are the diseased one, whom we fear to touch. Only the wind is yours. You are the beggar who averts his face, the homeless person who has given up asking. You howl in the storm. For any of us who have lived in times of poverty, you know this feeling somewhat. So here's the deal. My work on a Sunday morning is about prompting thoughts and feelings, especially regarding subjects of a deep and meaningful nature. I doubt that anybody is going to have this conversation on a pickleball court or on a golf course or while swimming with a friend. We need times and spaces to explore these kind of deep and meaningful concepts. I hope by sharing some of Rilke's approaches to the concept of God, sometimes a falcon, other times a storm, and still more times a song, that you too will perhaps take the time to explore your perceptions and how you came to develop them. It's deep spiritual work to reflect on what ideas you acquired from childhood, what you continue to embrace, what you embrace today that wasn't there when you were growing up, and what you can let go of. May we all commit to honor our journeys and that of others who may or may not share another's personal perspective. Diverse human understanding is a value that we Unitarian Universalists cherish. We cherish this respect for one another. It reflects the idea that interdependence also means that we love and respect one another, that we don't expect others to adapt a personal belief to meet the expectations of others, but that ultimately we need one another as a support on this path. That is, as we move along on our expedition through thought and through life. May it be so. Thank you for your kind attention.